So this is the 1537 scale model of my all-time favourite Star Trek ship, the USS Enterprise 1701A. When finished, it will be 22 inches in length. The model itself is the refit, but it does come with the decals for the A, which I'll be using. So let's start with the saucer section. There's fantastic detail in the parts. I do have the Aztec decals, which will go on in the end. As always, snip the parts off the sprue, file them down, and wash them to remove any dust and residue. As I am going to light this model, I first have to light block it. So a couple of coats of black, but first block the impulse engines and crystal dome with tape. Once the 2 coats of black have been applied, another couple of coats of silver, which will reflect the light better. The light kit I got for this is from StarTrekLighting.co.uk, well packaged with clear and concise steps. First thing we'll do is assemble the circuit boards. We have a 100 and 470 ohm resistor, 1 capacitor, a timer socket, a variable resistor to alter the speed of the flashing lights, and 2 connectors for the power supply and LEDs. Put the 2 connectors in place, the capacitor, the 2 resistors, the variable resistor and the timer socket. I have them held in place with tape while I solder. Once done, the pins for the capacitor and resistor can be snipped, and that's the first board completed. Now I'll do exactly the same for the second one. There you have them both done, and they can be put aside as they're not needed until later in the stage. The saucer section comes with the windows and navigation lights pre-drilled, except the thrusters, which I'm going to do now. They are optional, but as you get the LEDs, may as well use them. Take 6 50mm LED strips and place them on the saucer to get an idea of the cable length needed to connect them all. The 2 25mm strips are for the windows in the bottom half of the saucer, which also need to be drilled. Again, they are optional, but let's do them anyway. Before I begin joining the strips, one more check to make sure the negative is pointing to negative and positive to positive. I'm going to use the red for positive and black for negative. The wire is so thin you can strip it with your nail. First of all, tin the ends of the cable and the LED strips, and join the cables to the strips, again negative to negative, positive to positive. It's a good idea to do a light test at each section. A 9V battery will do the trick. And that's working fine. Now do the same for the rest of the strips. Once all together, a final light test before being placed in the saucer. A further 2 50mm strips will go either end of the bridge dome, and that's the windows all connected. Now to secure them onto the saucer and another light test. Cannot stress enough the importance of frequent light testing. Taking the glue gun, protect those solder joints. The last thing you want is them breaking just as you've glued the saucer section together. Taking the 4 3mm yellow LEDs, place them on the saucer to give you an idea of the amount of cable required. It looks much easier if you do it on a piece of paper, as it can get confusing when the cables start to look like a spaghetti junction. Keeping black as negative, solder it to the negative pins on the LEDs. Back on the saucer, size up for the red cable and solder it on. Once the red cable is joined together, add the 470 ohm resistor to one end, and another piece of red cable to the other. A light test, and that's working fine. Now place it on the saucer, but I won't fully fasten them down just yet, not until the very end of this stage. Put a 3mm LED in the dome section to light the bridge. Then take a piece of plastic where the blue LED will be secured into place. Drill a 3mm hole into it and the LED will fit in like so, and add a 470 ohm resistor to both LEDs and solder the red and black cables on. This diagram will give you a better idea of where the cables go. Again, I find it less confusing doing each section away from the saucer initially. Fit the LEDs in place and a quick light test and we're good. Moving on to the navigation lights, take 5 LEDs, 3 white, 1 red and 1 green, using the blue and orange cables. The green and red must have a 100 ohm resistor attached. This time I'm using the orange for positive and blue for negative. Testing both red and green and it's working fine. Join the 3 white LEDs as well, and an additional 2 extra lengths of cable that will connect to the navigation lights in the bottom half of the saucer. Now take one of the circuit boards and solder a red and black to the power supply that will connect to the circuit board. Now solder the orange and blue cables to the LED circuit kit as shown here. And that is the lighting for the top saucer section completed. A quick light test and it's looking good. Take the glue gun and secure the boards in place. So the bottom section of the saucer doesn't need as much illumination. 2 25mm LED strips will do and 1 top hat LED. The LED will go into the drilled hole illuminating the outside of the saucer. Solder cable to the LEDs, place a 470 ohm resistor onto the top hat LED and solder together. Solder 2 extra cables onto the bottom strip. These will attach to the thruster lights. The thruster LEDs will go as shown, but first I need to drill 2 holes to place them in. Two 470 ohm resistors will go onto each LED and solder together. The 2 cables from the LED strip will join together with the cables from the thruster lights, as well as 2 extra cables to be fed through to the neck of the ship. When the thruster cover goes over the LEDs, it will light up as shown. There are 2 decal grills for this piece as well, which should look great. Placing the array in position, give it a quick light test, and as expected, loads of light leak from the sides. Fill them in with putty. Another light test and that's much better. Still a little leak, so I'll give it another going over with putty, and of course there will be a couple of coats of primer and the base coat to go on as well. Like the top section, the navigation lights will be done exactly the same. For the red and green LEDs, place 2 100 ohm resistors on them and along with the top clear LED together. You might notice the LEDs are clear. That's because I broke the original 2 and had to replace them with ones I already had. Also, oddly ran out of orange and blue cable, so I had to improvise. To continue the blue cable, I used green with a blue stripe. That's from my taekwondo days. Green belt to blue stripe to blue. That's how I remember that colour code. Ideally, of course, you use the same colour throughout. Masking around the plasma assembly, I'll spray it clear blue. Once dried, I'll use mask oil to protect the area so I can prime the hull. And spray the saucer section pearl white. Using microcrystal clear and a toothpick, dab a little into the windows around the saucer. When dried, it will go clear and give a nice effect of glass being in place, rather than just a hole. Connect the orange and blue cables together, solder them and close the hull up, feeding the red, black, purple and green cables through to the neck. The mask hull can now also come off the dome. And that's it for part 1 of this build. I will be adding the Aztecing and decals, but not until the end. Lessons certainly learned, definitely need to buy a new soldering iron, and the only casualty so far, other than a few soldering iron burns, was my airbrush called it a day. The controller piece quite literally fell off in my hand. It was only a cheap one, and I have been meaning to invest in a better quality one anyway. In part 2, I'll start on the neck and the main hull. Until then, thanks for watching, and hailing frequencies closed. If you liked what you saw, please hit the like and subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the bell too. Thank you.